I think I gave you permission. Yeah. Thank you. I do not end the meeting.
So I'm done
He's
recording.
being
'cause I have
recorded,
no
he's
idea.
out.
Yeah. So if you talk about the flight to Egypt, you look at Matthew 2. In verse 13, it says, now when the Magi had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appears to Joseph in a dream and says, get up, take the child and his mother. So he gets to take his wife and his kid. And flee to Egypt, and there remain until I tell you. So Herod's going to search for the child to destroy him. So Joseph gets up, takes the child and his mother while it was still night, and leaves for Egypt. He remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill the scripture had been spoken out by the Lord through the prophet Hosea. Out of Egypt I have called my son. And that's in Hosea 11:1. So very soon after the Magi leave, Joseph is told, get up, grab your wife and the kid, head to Egypt. And then if you turned over to 19, I think it is. Yeah. So when Herod dies in 19, an angel of the Lord appears in a dream to Joseph, said, get up, take the child and his mother, go into the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. So Joseph gets up, takes the child, comes to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of Herod, he was afraid to go there. So being warned by God in a dream, he left for Galilee, came and lived in Nazareth. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene. So we all lived in Mahdi, give or take 40 years ago. And I sent you a URL about the flight of Egypt. And if you get down in there after 3 or 4 pages, there's kind of a map that looks like that, which are all the places in Egypt that supposedly the Holy Family went. And as long as you'll ignore the first part of the document, where it says everywhere he went, dragons were slayed and monuments fell off the ground and the sun sang or the sun shone and the birds sang. If you kind of go past that, it does talk about all the places that by tradition, the Holy Family went to Egypt. And as you get down through there to place number 17, it says Mahdi.
All right.
They don't spell it right, but that says Mahdi. And if you remember or not, that supposedly the Holy Family stopped in Mahdi, became friends with a lot of the sailors of the boats, and basically got on a boat, and the trip up into farther into Upper Egypt, they went by river based upon this friendship that they had with sailors out of Mahdi. There is a church built right along the Nile. If you go out to the Corniche and hang a left just a little bit, there's a monastery there. And it was recorded in, I'm sure you've heard this story probably too, that in 1976, on the 12th of March, a Bible floated across the Nile and floated up onto the steps of the monastery that goes down into the water. And the Bible was open to the passage in Isaiah that said, blessed be my people, Egypt. And that Bible is in the church, in a display case for everybody to see. And it's part of the tradition of that church and that monastery at that point. So we've all been to Egypt. We've all been to Mahdi. We lived there for a while. And if you think about it from a scripture standpoint, I'm going to take this in a sort of a left-hand turn for fun. You know, out of Egypt I was called my son, but it says in Matthew 2 that he was sent there. And if you think about being sent there, he was sent there because at that time for him, Egypt was a place of refuge. He was going there for refuge. If you think back to Joseph in the Old Testament and his family, because of the famine, they went to Egypt for a refuge, a safe place to be, until God called them out some, 400 years ago, Mel, something like that. If you think about when we lived there the second time, and also when we all lived there, but a little bit less well known at that time, is that the people were coming up from the Sudan and in generic from an Egyptian standpoint, Nubia, coming up into Egypt to escape war, to escape famine. And Egypt again was considered a place of safety, a place of refuge, a place to go in need. And so you think about this across the centuries, all the way back from Joseph's time, people have been going to Egypt, being sent to Egypt as a place of refuge and for a reason by the Lord. So what I'm going to say to you, because this can be really short tonight, just for fun, is thinking about January and New Year's resolutions, all that other fun stuff. Seems like y'all were sent to Egypt. Do you believe that you were sent to Egypt? There was a reason that you went to Egypt in the time frame that you went. So if that's the case, and you were sent there, then have you thoughtfully and prayed about why you were sent there and what the Lord may have wanted for you while you were there? It could be something as easily as simple as this group. It could be something much broader. But if you feel like you, like the Holy Family, like Joseph and others, were sent to Egypt for a time, for a reason, to a place that people have used for centuries and millennia for a place of refuge, a place of rest. If you were sent there, there was a reason. And have you prayerfully considered what that reason might be? And once you kind of figure out, maybe that was because of X, because of Y, my question to you would be, all right, so what are you going to do about it this year? Because Jesus was in Egypt, and 30 years later, he had a ministry. I think we all remember that part. Y'all were in Egypt. It's now 40 years later. You've had enough time to figure this out, guys. What is it that God would want you to do this year? And us, every single one. I'm always talking to myself when I talk about these things. But, in prayerful consideration, go back and say, did he send me or not? Yes. And if he did, what was I supposed to learn? What was I supposed to take? What was the reason, though I went to this place where millennia people have gone for a reason and been sent by the Lord for a reason? Joseph was sent, his family was sent, Jesus was sent. The Sudanese came in the sense of they were being sent out of Sudan. You guys were sent 40 years ago. So if that's all true, 40 years later, what are you supposed to do in 2023? Because the Lord sent you to Egypt in 1980.
True.
Or 70, whatever. Kasum was a little bit earlier. Mel was a little bit earlier. I don't remember how many years. And that's really about all I really wanted to share is that, okay, guys, what is it true? And if it's true, what are you supposed to do this year? You've had 40 years to goof off. Time to do something.
I think at the time, obviously, I didn't know why we were going to Egypt. Yeah, it was for my parents, right? It was for my dad's job, but I think I was just sent there to suffer. So in the beginning, but after the fact, right? After, I don't know, college maybe, or afterwards, just how much my experiences there helped me through my faith. And not only my faith, but also helping other people in different situations. We had anybody that the embassy didn't want to deal with, they gave them to Dad. So we had a plethora of people staying with us. Most of the time I was not allowed to say why, or even that we had somebody staying at our house. Just for legal reasons, and quite serious. So through that, I think I've learned just how accepting I am of other people. Situations don't define who they are. It's who they are at heart. So, some people don't understand why I don't mind talking to somebody because of their background. And it's like, well, it's not, that issue is not them. You know, I want to get to know them as a person. So, you know, and I don't think that would have happened if I stayed in the States, you know. Well, we could have gone to Italy or Mexico City. I think those were the other two positions Dad was offered, but I don't know. And even the friendships, like us here, you know, we've said this so many times, it's unexplainable, the depth of friendship that we have without talking for years and years and years. And just the connections that we had in the past couple of months have been so priceless. So, I mean, I could go on, I'm sure all of you could go on, just not knowing then why I was there, but after the fact, I do understand. So I haven't been slacking too much, Bob. I mean, I haven't.
I think all of us probably have a very different perspective today as we watch the political situation, especially in our South on our border, and refugees who are trying to come into our country, fleeing, you know, I'm sure there are some bad people who are trying to get into our country, but there are many who are just trying to come in for a place of safety and stuff. And I think that we have a very different perspective, having been a guest in another country and having seen how difficult life can be. And so, you know, that allows us to be to present a different perspective, to be a different voice, and to be compassionate and look for opportunities to minister, you know, to people who are trying to get in here. And, you know, should they come in legally? Yeah, but some of them are going to die before they make it to that point. What are we going to do? Mm-hmm. You what? Okay, he's coming back. Yeah.
I know that at the time that I was in Egypt, actually felt very, very strongly that God had us there for a reason. We actually had an opportunity. I think it was right in the middle of our time. So that would have been after 7th grade and before 8th and 9th for me, where the doors opened for my dad to go back to Lebanon. And that was a place that he had longed to return to. And I remember, because of our ages, Joy and me, and partially because of our connection with the youth group, you know, and things that were happening, my dad brought it to us and asked us to pray about it. Prior to that, pretty much, you know, he and my mom always, you know, made all the decisions about where we would go and all of that. And Joy and I spent a lot of time in prayer and searching. And we both just felt so strongly that God wanted us in Egypt, that God wanted us to remain there, and that God had things for us to learn and do. And we shared that with my dad. And he prayerfully took that, and his decision was made largely based on our discernment. And it was so interesting to watch, because that 4 years in Egypt actually became very difficult for my dad. His work with the church and all of that. There was a lot of conflicts. There was a lot of things that were not unfolding well. And I don't know how many times I thought about that his willingness to make that sacrifice to remain in Egypt for us was very profound. But those years in Egypt, for me, they became the foundation of my spiritual life. They became, when I went to the States for a year, then I went to Cyprus for 2 years, then I went to college. And throughout that time, I found myself drawing from the teachings that we had in youth group, drawing from the fellowship that we had created, drawing from my own experience of learning to listen to the voice of God. And oftentimes I didn't have a very good community of a place to grow in my faith. And I really relied so heavily on all that nurture, that had been put in place in those years in Egypt. Now, how does that unfold for today? That's a new question. I've got to think about that one. But there was no question in my mind that we hadn't been sent to Egypt, and for a time and for a purpose. And it radically changed both my and Joy's life.
On an interesting thing, I don't know if I've ever shared it with you. I think I have. The others probably haven't heard it. But before we went to Cairo the first time, somebody prophesied over us and told us that we were going to meet someone when we were there, and gave us a set of characteristics of this person that we were going to meet. And so, I'll be silly, a man wearing a red shirt and blue tie or something.
Man in white.
It was a man in white. Okay.
You will meet a man in white, and when you see him, you will know him, and you will know why you're here. And
for months and years, we kept looking for, somebody in a white suit or something,
White Galabea.
White Galabea, Michelin man, I don't know. But towards the end of your time there, God revealed to us that it was actually your father and her father. It was both. It was both sets of fathers. And we were there, for some reason for her dad, but also for your dad. And it was like, really? He doesn't wear white very often.
Really interesting.
Interesting. I love how you started it, Bob, because I didn't even think about that, right? So thank you for putting it in that perspective, that we were called to be there. And I think about that now as you were sharing that. And I think when you were talking about, refugees coming up from Sudan and stuff like that, I remember when I worked as a case manager at the YWCA, and it was a homeless shelter for women. And this was probably 10 years ago when we had a big influx of immigrants coming in from the Sudan that were getting settled in the States. And so if they came through Sudan and stayed in Egypt, they learned Arabic. And it was so profound when they would come in and I do the intake, and you could tell they were Sudanese, right? And you could hear them talking, and I was like, okay, and I just started talking to them in Arabic. And just that look of, first of all, it's like, there's somebody speaking a language I understand. And then that connectivity to be able to have that with somebody that comes into a program that they have no clue. I mean, talk about culture shock for all of us, right? So imagine a refugee coming in, now you're in the program, you got to follow these program guidelines, you got to do, your weekly goals. And here is somebody that speaks your language. And it was always such a blessing. I know it was a blessing for them, but it was such a blessing for me to be able to just have that look of utter shock on their face, to be like, wait a second, you speak my language? You know what I'm talking? And just and people in the would just kind of be like, hey, there she goes. She's making her magic work. And I think that was the greatest gift that I got, was to be able to connect with people and to be able to advocate. Talk about educating people to say, you can't have pork in this fridge, or we need prayer rugs, or, how are we going to do Ramadan and how do we support them? And people are like, what? So that's, I think, how it's shaped my life and in my career field that I've worked with. And then being able to be going back home, back and forth, for me, it was always the difference in wealth, and especially with women and how it impacts women, and given the work I've done, right? And moving forward, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm going to work on that one. That's going to be cool. And I think I see it, how it's unfolding in what we're creating back home in India. You know, maybe that's what it is creating that community and giving people that experience. I mean, I don't know. I'll get back to you guys on that one.
Julie looking very pensive.
I have no doubt that God sent me there. That was evident after the first year I was there. I was like, wow, God had his hand all over that. It was so plain to me from after like that first year, and then trying to decide whether I was going to go back when I came home that summer after my first year. And it was within a week or two, I was like, I'm not staying here. I'm going back there, you know. Joy was a huge part of my life, Melanie. You know that. You guys all know that. So, gee, Jehoshaphat. Honestly, that was such a monumental time for me. Both in healing with my dad, and wondering where, you know, because of my parents' relationship, they were divorced at that point, and wondering like, gee, where was my dad growing up? He really wasn't around. What the heck was going on? And then starting that process with him that went into college, and being able to reconcile with him and talk over and through things with him, because he was at a point that he could do that too. Man, it's just so many things. I could go on for days, really. But it was just a profound impact on my life, and a real spiritual foundation started there. You know, I'd grown up in the church. My dad was a pastor for 5 or 6, and then he became a teacher. Both my parents went into teaching. And so I always believed in God. But when I went to Egypt, it was, no, but do you have a personal relationship with God? I'm like, what? Say what? I just, you know, at that point in my life, God was he was just out there, and I believed in him. That was about it. You know? So that was a real youth group and Joy was a real turning point for me in my faith. So, yeah.
Sometimes he takes us kicking and dragging our feet to the place where he wants us to be, because he knows what's going to happen when we get there, if we are willing to open up our eyes and just listen to him and see what he wants to do. But it can be hard.
Yeah,
That's so true, because after my 8th grade year, I was not doing well. I sat down with my parents and they're like, do we need to go back? Do we need to go back home? Or are you going to turn yourself around? Basically. So it wasn't until I made that spiritual decision, kind of like you said, Julie, I found out that I can't ride on the coattails of my parents' faith. And I don't know what happened or how that actually got knocked into my head. Like, yeah, I need to have a personal relationship, and I'm here with my parents for a reason. So I got to figure out what my role is. So, quit moaning and groaning that you're in a stinky, dusty, can't wear shorts, tank tops, all that stuff, and figure out the good instead of the bad. And that was my focus my 9th grade year, was finding the good around me and not the bad. So.
Wow.
But you didn't like the guys when I walk home from school and I'd hear, I want to kiss you, baby. How do you do? So beautiful. I'd be like, well, I don't want to. I turned around and I was so mad walking home by myself. I was just like,
oh, I hated it. I hated Yeah, or even going shop, like going to Kanakalili, I was touched all the time and I didn't know it was touching me. Oh, that infuriated me. I wanted to catch him so bad. I wanted to bop him a good one. Ah.
Yeah.
And then my dad wanting 30,000 camels for me, that one didn't go over very well either.
Oh, I had 1,000 offered for me one time.
Oh, I was not happy with him.
My parents did that at the Kanakalili too. They bartered. Oh, the hairiest guy I ever saw. And he must have been like 23 and I was like 13. I went home and I cried.
Oh, I was so
Oh,
mad.
so bad.
Christy shares, she was 4. She shares that she used to hide under her bed at night because she was sure that some camel man was going to come and take her.
Oh, Lord.
She was terrified, she says.
I was terrified. I'm like, where are you going to put 30,000 camels? We don't even have a backyard.
I didn't want to be Rebecca pouring water out of the well for the camels.
Oh, it's a good story now. It wasn't right then at the moment. I was telling something like, I think it was a game. And I put like, I don't know, something camel, like 30,000 camels. And they all thought it was cigarettes, like the camel cigarettes. I'm like,
that would have been much better.
That would have been much better. Get him a case of cigarettes.
Christy
For
was
me,
sharing
it
with me. Oh, go Pam.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
No,
no. For me, I grew up as an Episcopalian, and I had a relationship with God ever since I was little. I used to tell God jokes and said, I know you know the answer to this one, but my dad used to sit and he'd pray with me every night, and on his knees, and it was just a special time. But in Egypt, it was just an explosion of faith. I can't explain it. And there's just so many little ways that it just ministered to me. Like Bob, I don't even know if you probably remember, like you and I did some sort of a play where I was praying the Lord's Prayer and you were God. So I even praying the Lord's Prayer now, I still remember all of those things that, that we did in our play. And then it's just everybody, all of you guys, like, I just respected all of you so much. I think I was younger than mostly all of you guys, but I remember you and Joy, Julie. I remember Melanie. I just loved you to pieces, and Robin, just hanging out with you, and Kasum. I remember you and Joy used to hang out, and you made little potato birds. It's just all of you all had such a huge influence on my life, and it was so hard to leave. And I honestly look back as it was just probably hands down a highlight of my life. And the fact that you're all back in it just blows me out of the water. I can't explain how incredible this is that we're even having this meeting. So I don't know. I know that hands down, God brought me to Egypt. What to do with it, I'm not sure, but I just am so grateful for it. There's just so many memories, and all of them are just incredible. But all you guys are so much a part of them. I mean, so much a part of them. So I thank you all for that.
Thank you. Explosion of faith. That's exactly how I feel, Pam. Just like,
Yep.
perfect.
And it was so hard to explain when we came back. Like I always came back every summer, and being around my youth group friends.
Yeah.
I just kind of stopped talking about it, really, because it just didn't make any sense to them. There was no connection in that way. So it's almost like two lives. Kind of.
Yeah.
And it's hard to have gone through something so incredible, and then you go to another youth group and it's just different.
They just kind of look at you like,
it's just, yeah. Yeah.
So what?
Hey, Robin,
Yes, sir.
why don't you go ahead and stop recording? People can still share, but why don't you stop recording?
Okay. Okay, I gotta put on my glasses to figure out where the button is.
I may actually have